how do you effectively deploy thought leadership for an internal audience, especially when you have an audience of some 250,000 employees? My guest today is Vishwas Anand. He's the marketing and communications lead at the Infosys Knowledge Institute. And in today's episode, I'm eager to talk with him about the Insight Store that Infosys uses to communicate insights across its organization. I'm also eager to talk with him about building alignment between the marketing, sales, and product functions. How can you facilitate the flow of ideas across your organization? I'm Bill Sherman, and this is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Ready? Let's begin. Welcome to the show, Vishwas.
Thank you, Bill. Glad to be here.
So I'd like to start with a question of a unique challenge that you've had to face at Infosys. Infosys has some 250,000 employees internally, and you had to find ways to share thought leadership across the organization. Let's talk about that for a moment. Let's talk about the project that you call the Insight Store. So, what challenges were you trying to address? How did it come to be?
Definitely, Bill. Thanks for asking. So, thought leadership, as you know, in the true sense, it really serves to inform and educate through influence and authority. And you cannot really build influence without putting the customer ahead. And your authenticity will also not really shine through if you don't get your thought leadership branding right. So we face similar challenges with influence and authority. Around a year back, the Infosys Knowledge Institute, we had produced a lot of content, around 250 odd thought leadership assets, including articles, podcasts, reports, videos, and so forth. But we didn't really have a way to be more consumer centric in a way that can be customized for different users or personalized by their preferences. And secondly, the branding of thought leadership itself wasn't really distinct enough to authentically serve audiences. So the search intelligence on Infosys.com was also not tailored or built around thought leadership as such. There was no way to distinguish Infosys thought leadership from the services offering content. So insights as a term as well is being used very loosely across our website. And the Infosys Knowledge Institute needed to really have that clear and defined positioning to be known for such insights. So when you look at the stakeholders within, be it sales, account managers, senior professionals, they didn't really have a way to access compelling insights across the organization before they head off to an important client meeting. So the insights we refer to in the Insight Store, they are very exclusive collections of such discussion points curated by topical interest. And this didn't exist before. So that was the unique challenge posed to us.
You were responsible in terms of that project to help build it and launch it. What did you do to personalize it? How did you make it easy for them to use?
Definitely. So building, as you know, with the scale of such an insight store, so we really had to build momentum and sustain it on both the insights generation side and the consumption side. And both of that really requires a robust foundation and governance structure across the organization. Now, it is one thing to really build those good quality insights and curate it, but quite another to really orchestrate a connected and personalized user experience. So we went about creating such a breakthrough insights-led destination, curated with over 650 talking points across industries and services. And one of the very important and critical elements or components of this Insight Store was the search intelligence feature, because that was clearly defined by a set of tags across topics and keywords. So when a user wants to really search across different topics, they can input their preferences, say digital transformation, or even go by a specific industry or service. In this case, let's take manufacturing for a more focused search query. So users will be presented with such specific insights across industries and services, and even a custom set of insights by their preference, so that they can really build that personalized wish list of sorts for their future reference. So our ambitious goal through this is to become the Google search engine for insights at Infosys.
And to underline, your target audience for this is the internal customer, not necessarily the end external customer, right?
Yes, yes, Bill. Through the Knowledge Institute app that we've developed, it's only for the internal stakeholders that we have designed this whole experience for.
And for them, as they're preparing for a conversation with their end customer, whether it's in a sales call or it's in a project meeting, to be able to access information quickly and have at hand the best thinking Infosys can bring available becomes incredibly important. But they don't want to waste a lot of time searching, which is why I find interesting the challenge of how do you create a search engine rather than just a massive articles and insights that they won't be able to find what they're looking for.
Yes, yes, most certainly. As you said it, I mean, you might have white papers, articles, podcasts, different kinds of assets created for by industries and services. But if a person is interested in a specific set of insights, rather than going through a long list of assets and rather than going deep into each of those assets to really understand what are the key talking points or the nuggets of information that are valuable for their upcoming discussion, we are making it easier to really give them and serve them those kinds of insights that are easily accessible, that are easily consumable in terms of nuggets, in terms of how well they can really personalize their discussion going forward. So it needn't be that every insight is really personalized for them, but they can also choose which kind of insights are really suited for their discussion and bookmark them, use them for a future reference by way of email or by way of any other mode that they see fit.
So before we talk about the launch and reception, I want to ask
Mhm.
you a question of just before launch. If I was someone in sales at Infosys and I was trying to find this information, what was my experience? How was I doing it before the launch of this tool?
Okay. So just to give you a background, this no such thought leadership insights across industries and services really existed at this scale, and particularly with the right level of nuggets that we could tailor it to. So it was probably available on a competitive benchmarking scale where sales could really access what other kinds of companies or competitors were using, or it would be a little more detailed in terms of the focus areas as well. So here, what we're trying to do is to really bring it down to a level of granularity where it's easily consumable, and yet it gives a fair idea into what the topic is about, so that even if they want to access the whole document or the whole report to get a better understanding, they can also do so through the Insight Store. So it serves both purposes. One, it's more like the McKinsey's 550. You get a
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
a 5 minute
So
glance into it, and then probably a more detailed view into the whole report.
So where I want to then turn to is we've got a sense of the landscape of what the solution was and what the current state was. How was it received? And what
Mhm.
did you do to increase use and uptake? Talk about that.
Sure, sure. So, so this was a one of a kind experience for thought leadership at Infosys, Bill. So I helped conceptualize this with a user-friendly experience and deploy it with curated content. And it's ranked number one among related insights apps on the company portal on the unique visitors metric. So it's got thousands of visitors. And as it's very tightly integrated into the sales effectiveness function within Infosys, we're also trying to build effective pathways through thought leadership that can be accessed anytime, anywhere. And it has this enhanced experience as well, built for the user. So it's personalized around those insights for the user. So one of the contributing factors for Infosys is recent superior LinkedIn social connectivity rating among sales executives compared to peers was also due to this kind of thought leadership being relayed within the app and being efficiently channeled and streamlined by topical interest.
Before we leave this topic of the Insight Store, not many organizations have to face the challenge of trying to get insights out to 250,000 employees. If you were to offer a bit of advice to someone who's responsible for getting insights out to their organization, maybe they've got fewer employees. Are there any generalizable lessons that you could share with them that would make their challenge a little bit easier?
Definitely. So one thing is to probably get a sense, a pulse of the customer. So in this case, ours was the internal stakeholders. So in case they want to develop thought leadership practitioners in their organizations, want to develop something similar, get a sense of what are the current challenges they're facing. Because in most cases, it's about accessing or discoverability of such insights. So the ability to easily consume such insights would be something that can be looked into, and the modalities of creating such a governance structure within the organization in question as well. Because once you have the foundation in place with all the right kind of elements, be it the user experience, be it the kind of governance that can happen through this app, the kind of receptiveness it can have among sales executives, I think the foundational elements are key to really get it going and sustaining enough momentum in the future.
And what you said there leads to another topic that I want to talk about with you is how thought leadership, even though it's a relatively new function, say the last 10 years we've been using it on the corporate level as a term, and many organizations are just starting to embrace it now. If since thought leadership has just emerged, how can it bring marketing and sales and product? How can it bring those teams in alignment? How is it the connective tissue?
It's a great question, Bill. So, so marketing is generally measured by demand generation. As you're saying, that there are very different goals by which each of these functions are really defined and what they're trying to achieve. So, marketing for one is defined by or measured by demand generation, sales by the number of deals closed, products and services teams by the ability to really grow their clients' business portfolio. And without this common language and alignment to a customer centric approach, we generally see that the perceived value of thought leadership may not be clearly in line with each function's goals. So, while a number of companies would focus on demand conversion, I feel there's a greater purpose to really aligning with models that use thought leadership to manage demand creation performance across the functions, so across marketing, product, and sales functions, so that the revenue functions can just focus on creating demand rather than just converting it. So for this, I think it's very important to cultivate dual mindset, one that really takes persistence to nurture the existing accounts and another to really build new relationships from scratch. And so certain companies have tried to do it by being closer to the customer. They try to bring about innovation through corporate innovation labs. They activate the innovation ecosystem, for instance, prototyping ideas with clients and really taking them to market. So I feel such labs can really accelerate the development of such new solutions to their clients and prospects.
Let's talk again about your world. Where are your touch points and how does that work as you're working? Because you're in the Infosys Knowledge Institute, IKI. How are you working with the more broad marketing team, sales and product? What does your day look like and where are your touch points?
Definitely. So my touch points, I mean, exist across the distribution side of things, Bill, more on the go-to-market side of things. So I look at those elements, and I've also in publishing, I've been very interested in understanding the whole value chain within the publishing life cycle. So I really believe in bringing about an agile framework to publishing, which hasn't really happened before. So you would see brands probably purchasing that one-off writing tool or that plagiarism software or a CMS or even an SEO tool, but they're not really heavily invested in the end-to-end publishing workflow. So I try to look at the whole user journey and map different elements within the publishing life cycle. So looking at that from that perspective, how different steps can be really obviated, manual steps can be obviated across the journey, and one that would bring in more agility to the whole workflow so that brands can really control the whole end-to-end publishing workflow and life cycle. And this will really
So
help.
let me interrupt you for a second here.
Sure,
When
sure.
you say publishing, you're not talking book publishing, you're talking digital content publishing. Is that correct?
Digital. Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
right.
Cool. So
So
please continue.
sure, sure. So the whole publishing, right from the curation of an idea itself to really conceptualization of that idea to really taking it through the whole modalities of reviewing, co-authoring, reviewing, designing, and then finally the distribution level. So each of these involves various stakeholders. So it could be the designer at the design level. It could be the reviewer. It could be the co-creator of such an essay. So each of these, I mean, there can be multiple manual steps within larger organizations, and all of them follow a sequential waterfall approach traditionally because there are very different or disconnected systems working in silos in order to get each of these things done. So that to my previous point on integrating the whole agile life cycle into this journey, not many brands have really thought about it and have spent time or effort to really curate such a model. So when I was given this opportunity to reimagine the whole waterfall publishing model and build this agile collaborative model with the tech teams, of course, with the designers, of course, and presented it, I was given the opportunity to even present it to our co-founder and chairman, Mr. Anand. So that was very well appreciated. It was well received, and it went about as a project, and now it's scaling it up to the larger Infosys.com as well.
If you are enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about the podcast, please leave a 5-star review and share it with your friends. We are available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all major platforms, as well as at leveragingthoughtleadership.com. So let me ask you this question. I agree with you that there's a tradition of the waterfall methodology for thought leadership. We're going to do deep thinking, then we'll write this white paper, right? And then we'll put it out there. How does an agile approach to thought leadership work? Are you thinking in terms of sprints and story points? Are you using a Jira board? Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think this is a topic where your training as an engineer really sort of influences how you're approaching thought leadership. And I'd love to dig in more.
Definitely. So if you look at traditionally how the life cycle works is probably one stakeholder will come up with an idea, and then the idea is bounced off a few other stakeholders, and then you get some kind of a buy-in. In most cases, it's with the senior leadership who's owning that agenda. So
right.
all this happens, and then the co-creation of content doesn't really happen as such. It's probably one person drafting out the content and then sending it out for review, and then that person passing on the feedback. Then it goes to the second person for review, and then the third person, and then the fourth person. The SMEs are involved, multiple other stakeholders. Now the problem with that approach is that it's very traditional in the sense there's no transparency before the one has to lead to another in order for the previous stage to be successful. But it doesn't have to be the case. It can be a stage where people are co-authoring on a given document at any given point of time and pass on feedback, so that time is not spent in really understanding the perspectives of the authors in question at a point very late in the whole journey. Rather, it can happen at the earliest stage possible to understand the ideas, the deep thinking, as you say, that can really be the brainstorming or the ideation can happen seamlessly through one interface where multiple people are working seamlessly and handing off from one to another. So different stages handoff also happen very seamlessly. So the automation, the integration, the ability to really think on the go, move a draft from an ideation level to the final publication level can really happen at different stages, which can be more agile to really improve the time to market. It can build efficiencies within the whole structure and governance. Standardization can also happen very effectively within the whole workflow. So that is where I feel the agile model is the way forward.
Well, and what's underlying this is a look at how can technology eliminate obstacles in the creation and deployment of thought leadership, right? So how can more people contribute in parallel rather than in sequence, right?
True, true, true.
And I think you talk about governance there, right? Sometimes collaboration, sparks great insights, and sometimes you get too many people collaborating at the same time and it turns into chaos. So how are you
True.
managing that?
That's a very good point, Bill. So I think it's up to the person in question who's leading the program or leading the project to really manage that. So we don't really, so it's flexible to that extent. I mean, it's up to that person to really bring in stakeholders as and when required, to take them off as and when required. So everyone's inputs that needs to be there can be there at a given point of time, at the point where it's really required. And then the agile model can really take care of the rest of the technologies, integrations, and other stuff that's happening at the back end to make it more efficient.
I'm going to ask you a challenge here and see if you can do it. I would guess that most of our listeners do not have training in Agile, right? So if you were to sort of break down a key insight about Agile and Agile software methodology that would be relevant to someone who's practicing thought leadership, how do you break that down? So do the translation, if you will, from the world of software and engineering into thought leadership.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Bill. I think there are challenges with people, process, and technology which can be handled by agile. And that's how I'd like to break it up. So, in terms of probably people, it could be one stakeholder after the next. That we were trying to break down that approach. So, we're trying to say that multiple people can collaborate on a given project. So, in terms of processes, it doesn't have to be one process after another. Because when you're looking at a waterfall model, you could probably use a tool like Grammarly at a stage when the draft is fully complete. But that process doesn't have to happen at that time. It can happen on the go. It can happen seamlessly within the same interface. So the automation can also happen there in terms of processes. In terms of technologies, you can probably have an SEO tool that is available for you, and you try to get the right kind of insights, usually at the beginning of the draft creation level, once you have the topic at hand. Even that part of the technology, or even the CMS, the distribution angle of it. So the CMS doesn't have to be at the last stage or at the very first stage and no stage in between. So it can happen very seamlessly, that the handoffs from between people, process, and technology, once that is integrated very seamlessly into an architecture, I think agility will be able to make the right strides forward for publishing.
And so it becomes a set of parallel work streams where all of the things that need to happen do happen, but they're not as structured time bound, right? And
Yes.
so you can free up as you're working on things so that the waterfall doesn't get jammed in the
Yes.
process.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
True. True. True.
Let's talk about your personal journey for a little bit. As we've sort of discussed, you started as an engineer, you have an MBA, you've moved into marketing. How did you land in the world of thought leadership? Because I'm pretty certain that when you went to school, you didn't think you were going to be practicing thought leadership. So, how did you get here?
That's a very interesting question, Bill. And yeah, so I mean, so after doing my engineering degree, I then got into a software job. So there I was a software developer for a couple of years. I frankly didn't like coding, although I mean, it taught me of a lot of nice things along the way, including the agile approach, of course. So the agile software development approach. But then I had to do an MBA in order to get into marketing, which was my passionate area. I did my MBA. Then soon after that, I got into this mid-sized firm, Aspire Systems, where I was mainly handling services marketing for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden, I just had this meeting with our CEO then. He was very approachable at one of the board meetings, and mentioned to him in passing that, look, I would love to take up content creation, writing for the company, because I understand delivery executives don't really have the time, and what they produce isn't really up to the mark. So having a team like that would really make a difference to the company. Then the CEO was kind enough to give me a role. So I helped set up thought leadership marketing for that mid-size IT firm, Aspire Systems, built a team from the ground up. So I had around 8 to 10 people reporting under. I had research analysts who were handling different verticals and horizontals across the company. And we really saw the difference thought leadership could make. My team produced around 700 thought leadership assets in my previous firm. So articles, the white papers, you name it. And also collaborated with the Gartners and Forresters of the world. It really had those briefings, developed frameworks such as the digital transformation framework, omni-channel retail framework. So all this had given me the right kind of expertise and knowledge to really take me into a full-fledged career into thought leadership. So, and then Infosys was very interestingly starting a new thought leadership team. So it was Mr. Nilekani's brainchild, our chairman's brainchild, to have this Infosys Knowledge Institute, and Jeff Kavanaugh was leading it. So I was one of the first members hired, in fact, the first from India to be hired externally into the Infosys Knowledge Institute. And it's been a great journey, enriching journey of learning since then. So in Feb 2019 was when my journey at Infosys started, and yeah, it's been a wonderful journey so far.
So do you see yourself as an engineer who moved into marketing, or are you a marketer who moved into thought leadership? When you're doing your day job, okay, and you're working on the challenges that the Knowledge Institute throws your way, what lens are you using and what sort of framework are you using? How are you thinking about problems?
Sure. And I think I'd go back to that publishing model example, Bill.
Okay.
So I think that whole exercise or that whole project and initiative helped me really acquire that problem finding mindset. So rather than just a problem solving one. So I think problem finding is where it helped me. So the engineering background has also helped me decode problems along the way. But then this is I feel thought leadership marketing is more about understanding where the pain points are even before the customers face such pain points. So being able to do that in a multi-stakeholder environment, get the required buy-in, I think those are certain challenges that both on the people side and on the expertise side was required to really thrive in this role. So I would say that that's the kind of lens I would use on a daily basis.
And so you talk about problem finding. And I think that's one of the responsibilities of thought leadership is that ability to look around the corner into the future, see 3 or 5 years ahead and say, this is a problem that's coming. Let's create a solution today and let's bring people along with us. And so I love how you're pulling the tools that you've used from engineering training into that. Problem finding, I think, is something that a lot of our listeners could build as a skill. So you've now been a couple years at Infosys. What are some of the lessons that you've learned that might be relevant to our audience?
Definitely. So I think building this whole thought leadership marketing function at Infosys has been a great learning for me, especially because this is a thought leadership sub-brand. So we had to look at certain examples like the McKinsey Global Institute, Accenture Research, etc. And some of the lessons that I've learned is that it needs to really build synergies with the parent brand in order to be successful. Because when you have a disconnected sub-brand positioning, it will not only derail the sub-brand, but also create confusion about the parent brand's larger purpose. And once you have that positioning clear, that's when B2B decision makers will be able to relate with the sub-brand a lot more, and then the insights, and then the parent brand's vision as well for larger business opportunities. Because I strongly believe that thought leadership and brand rankings go hand in hand. There's a very strong correlation between that. Although we haven't really reached that stage of maturity yet, I feel when we get there, we'll be able to really strongly correlate between our thought leadership ranking and the brand's ranking in the future as well.
One of the things I was going to say is you and I have had an ongoing conversation about metrics, right?
Mhm.
And how do you measure? And I don't think we should close this conversation without at least touching on metrics. So, my question to you, because you look at it from the thought leadership marketing perspective, the content marketing perspective, what metrics are you following and which ones have you found are useful, either at a global end user consumer level, so your end clients or your internal customers?
Yes, that's a wonderful question, Bill. I know there's been a lot of talk around this specific
It's a
topic
tough one.
because
Yeah.
it's a tough one. Of course, I mean a lot of companies are still decoding it and figuring it out. So yeah, so I feel, I mean, personally, as I was saying, I mean, the strong correlation between a thought leadership ranking and the brand ranking. So once we have that in mind, I feel the differentiation that happens should not be basis certain vanity metrics like likes, impressions, and so forth, but rather it's because those will just distract from the desired thought leadership positioning of the firm, and it will hit the brand in the long run. So I feel brands should really shift from an operational to a more strategic mindset. And this is where I'd like to propose a model I've devised, the 3A content model. So it's called the authenticity, accuracy, and agility. So authenticity is about just building that human connection with the desired branding and storytelling. Accuracy is building that or establishing the credibility with research-backed insight. And then agility is the way you really look at an idea in terms of how well it's able to anticipate trends and supplant other ideas that are past their sell by date. So one interesting aspect I'd like to point out here is that if you look at certain trending topics, look at Google Trends, for instance, popular topics like 5G or blockchain, you would see how difficult it is to really get a differentiated perspective on such a topic because content saturation has really hit those topics. So there's a lower probability to really create something compelling in those areas, despite the higher viewership you can get. So in view of
There's an inverse
probably,
relationship between the number of results on Google versus your
yes.
ability to say something new. Yeah.
Yes. And when you compare it to an emerging topic like sustainability as well, so I feel we need to really need to take a balanced approach between such niche topics for targeted consumers and the trending ones to increase reach, because the niche ones are as important, if not more important, as they offer path-breaking ideas in a field, and they may not really get the desired reach for a start. Just to give an example, when IDC first came up with the term omni-channel retail, so this was in a September 2010 report, the term wasn't very popular then. It was only in 2013 that it became really a buzzword for marketers. So such terms like, say, sustainability, omni-channel retail, they're clear examples of what I'd call share of wisdom, and that is the true test of thought leadership storytelling, to really anticipate the market ahead of peers. But because share of voice probably will talk about what's existing and what's trending and how competitors fare. But I feel that this is something I've just coined. I mean, share
Mhm.
of wisdom as a way to really way to a true test for thought leadership storytelling, and being able to predict or yeah anticipate the whole market and for return on innovation.
So you touch on something that I've talked about for years, but in a slightly different way. That ability to coin a phrase and be able to insert it into standard business lexicon. When you coin the term and other people start using it, they're starting to see the world through your lens, right? And so it doesn't matter whether you're an individual or an organization. One of the ways, now it's a historical and a retrospective, is to look at that, like you say, from a wisdom perspective. Did you start using a term that, people are using 15, 20 years later? Is the long-term true metric of, did you shape the discussion? But if you're looking to try and fill a sales channel, for the month or the quarter, that's a tough metric, right? And so this balancing between shaping a conversation long term versus influencing the world today within the time span that a business cares about. That's a tough challenge.
It is. It is. I think it's a challenge every thought leadership marketer faces, Will, as you rightly pointed out, between the short term and the long term content play.
So, Vishwas, you and I could continue this conversation for another hour or two, but I think this is a great place to leave it there, perched on the balance between focusing on today and thinking about the long term future. Thank you very much for joining me with this conversation.
Thank you so much, Bill, for having me on your show. It was wonderful talking to you.
If you're interested in organizational thought leadership, then I invite you to subscribe to the OrgTL newsletter. Each month, we talk about the people who create, curate, and deploy thought leadership on behalf of their organizations. Go to the website orgtl.com and choose Join Our Newsletter. I'll leave a link to the website as well as my LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing what you thought of the show.